We appreciate you being with us this morning, and this is kind of exciting for us for a couple of reasons. Number one, because of the guests that we have with us today, who I think we're going to hear some great things from, but also because I know Caroline's excited. This is our last event of the year. So Caroline's pretty excited about that. She may actually get about a 2-week break before she has to start working on the next event. I want to give some special thank yous to our sponsors, Postlethwaite and Netterville. Thank you very much, David. Jerry, thank you to Iberia Bank for your sponsorship. We appreciate you guys very much. Today we're excited to end the year, as I mentioned, with our Lessons from the Corner Office event. For those of you joining us for the first time for this event, this series features leaders of industry from our own backyard. It's an opportunity for us to hear the stories that we may sometimes not know. And we hear it from the people that have experienced it, lived it, and brought these things to fruition. So it's really exciting to hear from those folks. Before I introduce our special speaker today, I'd like to ask David Edmond to join us on the stage for a quick message from our presenting sponsor, PNN.
Thanks, Troy. As Troy mentioned, I'm David Edmond. I'm with Postlethwaite in Netterville here in Lafayette. When I saw Troy this morning, he put me on the spot. He said, "Oh, so you have a couple of good jokes lined up for us this morning?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I'm not that great of a joke teller, but I always default to Boudreaux and Thibodeau jokes. So I came up with one just for Troy." So, a while back, Boudreaux and Thibodeau decided they were going to build themselves a camp. So they got together and they said, "Well, let's start making our supply list, and we're going to go to Pierre Guidry Lumber, and we're going to get us some. Let's start with 2x4s." So Boudreaux tells Thibodeau, he said, "Go in there and get us a bunch of 2x4s." So Thibodeau goes in, asks the clerk, he says, "Look, I need a bunch of wood." He said, "But we're going to start with some 2x4s. Give me your 2x4s. So the clerk says, "Well, how long do you want them?" "I got different ones." He goes, "How long do you want them?" He goes, "Boudreaux didn't tell me." He says, goes back to the truck, talks to Boudreaux, goes back in. He says, "Boudreaux says we want them a long time because we're building a camp." So with that, Postlethwaite and Netterville, some people still don't know the name. In fact, Chris asked, he said, "Are you guys attorneys or CPAs?" I said, "We're a CPA firm, but we have been around for a long time. We have not been in Lafayette for a long time. We've been in Lafayette. We're about to get our start our 10-year, celebrate our 10-year anniversary in, I guess, January. PNN bought a practice here in January, February of 2009. But the firm itself has been around since 1949. So in addition to our 10-year anniversary here in Lafayette, we're about to celebrate our 70th anniversary as a firm. And we're a typical CPA firm in the sense that we offer audit, doing financial statement work, tax work, tax planning and tax compliance. But we also have a large consulting division. In fact, our consulting division is our second largest division in the firm. And it does kind of anything that doesn't fall into those traditional buckets, from valuations to litigation support to internal control work under Sarbanes-Oxley, forecasting, budgeting, you name it, almost anything. It seems like every day there's something else new that we do. But the firm has been around for a long time, and one of the nice things about the firm, when Mr. Alexander Postlethwaite started it, he was very keen on community involvement. And so the firm has held that as one of our core values for a long time. And we, in fact, it's united with the community as one of our core values. And so being here with One Acadiana, we've gotten really involved over the last several years of One Acadiana. Have enjoyed being able to be here, sponsoring this event, and attending and participating in the numerous great events that One Acadiana puts on. So we're thrilled to be here. So I'm not going to say very much more, because I know the more exciting part is to hear Chris and the story of Waiter, especially with the exciting news that they just had last week. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it back over to Troy, and hopefully you guys can get a lot out of the rest of the program. Thank you.
David, only being here for 10 months, I haven't earned the right yet to tell Boudreaux and Thibodeau jokes. So I'm going to stick with Alabama jokes for a little while longer. Before I introduce our speaker, I want to mention one other thing. Somebody on our staff is celebrating a birthday today, and I want to mention it's Millicent Nugent's birthday, and so we're not going to sing, Millicent, don't worry, but we do want to wish you a happy birthday. But before we finish, I will say before we get started, the last 15 minutes or so we are going to reserve for audience Q&A, and Caroline has told me when she stands up and picks up this microphone, which is gone, by the way. Oh, she's got it in her hand. That means for me to shut up. So we're going to move into some audience Q&A. So without further ado, It's my great pleasure to welcome here today Mr. Chris Meaux, founder and CEO of Waiter. Well, Chris, thank you for being with us. First of all, congratulations are in order. Getting to travel to New York and ring the NASDAQ opening bell, pretty exciting.
Very exciting. You know, it always stumps me when someone says congratulations because I'm okay on what? Well, the acquisition, the bell ring,
I've got that coming
all
up.
that
I've
good
got that
stuff,
coming up in a
right?
minute.
Gotcha,
don't worry
gotcha.
about it. Well, the story of your growth has made a lot of headlines across the country. And you've expanded to new cities. You formed the Restaurant Incubator Lab, and most recently, as you just mentioned, the Bite Squad acquisition. Give us a snapshot of where Waiter stands now.
I think we're going to slow down to the beginning of the year. It's it's been a pretty slow year to this point. No, it's been great. We obviously with the Lancadia transaction and going public through that process in November, we had a balance sheet that was pretty strong, and we had been looking at opportunities all along, and I've known the folks at Bite Squad for a couple of years now. We've kept in touch, and it just seemed like the right transaction at the right time, so we did it.
Yeah, I have to share a quick personal story about Waiter. Before I moved here to Acadiana, I came home from the office one day, and my daughter, 13 years old, and 3 of her friends were sitting at the counter in our kitchen eating Chick-fil-A. And I said, how did you? None of them can drive. I'm like, how did you get Chick-fil-A? And she said, oh, Waiter. And so they had a delivery from Waiter. I thought that was pretty. I was like, what is Waiter? So then they explained it to me. So I was pretty excited to see that. Tell us a little bit about your entrepreneurial background. You know, one of the things we were talking about earlier that we haven't heard a lot about from the folks that we do these programs with is about failure. Mm-hmm. And you've got a little bit of experience with failure, and most every entrepreneur does.
More than I care to think about, yes. Yeah, it's, I guess when you start out as an entrepreneur and you set out on a journey that you're not really sure what the ending is going to look like, you always think it's just like the storybooks. It's like what you see on TV, or, it's always a happy ending. And really entrepreneurship is about, success and failure, and more failure than success, because very few companies actually achieve the things that we've achieved to this point. And so, I started out as an entrepreneur at 23 years old. I posted on Facebook not long ago. I wrote my first business plan, and when I was living in San Jose, California at 23. It took me, 25 years to get it right. But the lessons that I learned and the failures are really what allowed me to get it right this time, because you try things and you do things a certain way, and then you realize they're not working. You have really 2 options. You can quit, which, believe me, at one point in my life, I felt like I would quit, and I did, actually. Just didn't want to do anything. And then one day, another seed is planted for an idea, and then you pick yourself up off the ground and you move forward, and that's what I did. And boy, am I happy I did now.
So an overnight success, 25 years in the making.
25 years in the making, that's right.
Interestingly, I saw you speak at the innovation conference, the Opportunity Machine Innovation Conference, and you did something that I've never seen anybody do before. You brought your wife and brought her on the stage with you.
Right.
And, I thought that was a great perspective, and you talking about how you can't do it alone, and whether that's with the personal support and other support that you got from your wife, or the people that you brought on as your team at Waiter. And I thought that was an interesting perspective. She said she stuck with you because you're good looking that day. I mean, so I doubt that.
It certainly wasn't for my money, I can assure you.
Tell us a little bit about that, about what that type of support meant to you.
Yeah, so, I think, number one, I used to be uncomfortable, doing things like this, where you sit here and you talk to folks about having success. And I didn't get to do it very often, right? But when I started doing this, 2 or 3 years ago, it made me uncomfortable. And, I'd go home and I'd tell my wife about it, and I'd see the look on her face, and it's like, okay, you're talking about all these things, and you're getting all of this credit, but there was a lot that happened in between that. I say, yeah, and I talk about that as well all the time, and she's like, well, sometimes it doesn't feel like the family gets any support, so maybe we should start talking about this together, because this is her talking. She said, I've had so many people at these events come up to me and say, well, what was it like for you? So that day I decided to pull her up on stage, because you hear the success stories of these entrepreneurs, and whether it's men or women, you just don't hear about the stories about how they got there and the people who had to support them to make it all happen. And a lot of times when you go through the things that I went through, big failures, and I had some really big ones, you end up single and alone, because your family can't take that kind of pressure, or they don't stick with you, or they had some grand idea of what it was supposed to be like because they saw it on TV too, or something like that. But it's the really successful entrepreneurs are the ones where their families stand behind them and get them up off the ground, like my wife did and my kids did in our instance. And we protected our kids against some of the knowledge of all the things that were happening during the failure processes. But then when you have success like we've had, you want to be able to share it with your family, because there's no way I would be where I am today had it not been for my wife, because number one, she supported our family. When I decided to do this, I had no income and no prospects of an income for a period of time. She had a good job, she supported the family, and it wasn't, even through the failures, she continued to support the family. So we talked about it, and I thought it's important that I pull her up on stage and have her tell her side of the story. And we didn't get enough time for her to tell the whole story, obviously, but I think more of that needs to happen, because entrepreneurs can't get to where they are without a lot of support, not just from their family, but others. But it starts with the family.
Right. So in those early years, what were some of the things that kept you up at night? And have those things changed?
Oh, boy. In the failure years?
Well, through the failure years or the early years of Waiter?
Oh, yeah, for Waiter. Well, the thing that kept me up at night most was, I hope this isn't another failure, right? And what can I do to prevent it? Because, the day you make a decision to bring on external investors where you have other people's money at risk, the game changes. And so every night I'd go to bed thinking about all the investors who I had in previous failures, and what we did to either lose their money or not be successful, or what it was, and then what could I do to ensure that that doesn't happen again. But this is what I learned most, I think, is that when you go to bed thinking about these things, you have to, and look, from the day I started Waiter, I didn't think about the big picture any longer. And the first time I did this, I was thinking about the end game, the end, right? I was thinking, okay, we're going to be this great company. And with Waiter, I was just thinking about, how do we get up to tomorrow and serve more people food, including myself. And so if you think about it on a day-by-day basis, and you don't worry about, the being a big success, but just know that whatever you do today, you're protecting your investors' investment and hopefully furthering or advancing their return, then it makes it a lot easier to deal with it.
What do you consider the biggest threat to your company? I mean, obviously, you bought Bite Squad.
I just bought them. Yeah. I think that's, that's the other thing that I thought about every night. I don't think of the big companies that we compete against now as a major threat, because their business model is different. But Bite Squad had the same business model as small to medium markets, W-2 employee drivers, the food photography for the restaurants, more advantageous pricing for the restaurants, and so on. And so I really worried about them more than anything else. And so best way to eliminate your biggest threat is to buy them.
Yeah.
And so that's what we did.
Well, that's one way to take care of it. How do you see your company changing in the future to stay ahead of the competition?
Well, for us, it's industry specific. I think, the restaurant industry, dining patterns of all of us are changing. We want to spend more time at home because we are usually not home till late, or 7, 8 o'clock at night, and we got to get the kids in bed and so on. But then also you have to think about the other side of it, which is the restaurant partner side of it. And I see kind of the industry over the next 5 years changing dramatically. The way that we dine in a restaurant today is going to be different 5 years from now. And actually, that's how Waiter started. We started to solve the problem of actually being able to order in a restaurant, sitting at your table on your smartphone, and then, instead of trying to find the server to get your check when you're ready to leave or when you want that second drink, just order it on your phone at the table and then pay whenever you're ready to leave. I think that's actually still going to happen. And people say, oh, well, it's going to eliminate jobs. It's progress. I mean, I equate it to the same thing that happened in the automotive industry when assembly lines became automated and robots started to take over assembly lines. People will train for other skills and they'll do other things. But I think in the restaurant space, margins are getting tighter. The front of the house operations are harder and harder to manage over time. And there's 5 basic systems that restaurants use. It's a delivery provider, a POS, a credit card processing company, a loyalty program, and table management. And ultimately, technology is going to integrate into one application, is going to take over that space. And I think Waiter's going to be at the forefront of leading that effort in the small to medium markets and small mom and pop or single operator units. And so that's what I see as the future for Waiter.
With that being the future, and you mentioned the W-2 drivers, the employees, that means you're going to need a strong workforce. What's been some of your biggest opportunities and challenge in talent recruitment or finding talent?
Yeah, so I was warned when I started the company in 2013. The first thing I did is I went out and talked to venture capitalists about raising money. And I was going to, I wanted to do it through venture capital because the first time I had this big failure, it was institutional investors, big institutional investors. They put a lot of pressure on you. VCs tend to be a little more longer-term focused and forgiving. But they would all tell me you can never hire enough people in Louisiana to develop the technology you're going to need to develop and continue to develop it over the long term. So you'd have to move to Austin or Silicon Valley or wherever. I didn't want to do that. I left Louisiana in 1991 and was gone until 2011. So I was gone for 20 years. And I didn't want to leave again. I wanted to build this company here. What I have found is that there is a tremendous amount of talent, not only in Louisiana, but there are a number of native Louisianians who left the state and went work elsewhere that want to come home. But there was not an opportunity if you were a software developer or you wanted to work in technology to be able to come home. Or there were not many. There were some, and especially here in Lafayette, it's been very progressive in attracting software development companies. So we've had no problem at all finding the number of software engineers that we've needed, the number of qualified people for customer support and restaurant operations and accounting and sometimes others' misfortune has been our fortune. We were lucky to effectively we went public in 6 months essentially. We went from being a private startup to a publicly traded company in 6 months. We had no accounting systems in place. We had no accounting staff in place. We had no control systems and process and all these things. Well, it just so happened there was a company that got acquired out of Lafayette and was going to move everyone to Houston. That was a public company that had chief accounting officer, controller, other accounting people, HR, and so we were fortunate to find these people right here in Lafayette at the right time that we needed them to come into our company to take us public. We could not have made it happen as easily without that. So it's a long way of saying that there's no shortage of talent here locally. You just got to know how to go find it. And we've learned how to find the right people, and we've been fortunate. Some of it's just fell in our lap.
I hope we got that on tape, because that's that's something that's going to be great for our recruiting efforts and business development. Because that's obviously the number one thing that everyone wants to know about is your ability to find your human capital, your workforce. How many cities in Louisiana do you serve right now?
I don't know the exact number. We're in all the major cities in Louisiana, and a few of the smaller places like New Iberia or Houma, Thibodeau, Crowley, Jennings, Rain, places like that. It's a bunch. We were serving 230 cities, just Waiter, and then with the Bite Squad acquisition, we added another 300 cities, so over 500 cities now, with a national footprint. So we were mainly southeast. Now we have a national footprint. We'll serve 500 plus cities in 22 states now.
Wow. Well, that takes care of my next question, was about how many states. So how is, and I think you mentioned this, you talked a little bit about it in the workforce side, but South Louisiana's business environment, how has it helped your company thrive?
Well, I'll say it's, I don't know that we could have done what we are doing if it hadn't have been here. And I like to tell this story to investors when I talk to them, because I think this is analogous to what we've done. If you think about the 60s and 70s, in a little town in northwest Arkansas, there was a little retailer who had a dream of bringing his discount services to small markets throughout the southeast. And the same that people didn't believe that we could do it based here, they didn't believe that he could do it there. And now it's the largest retailer in the world, and that's Walmart. And so I think if you have a strategy and you stick to it and you believe in the markets that you're serving, then you could do this anywhere. I really not sure where that was going, because I forgot the question already. But I think it just says that, you know, the business climate in South Louisiana is perfect for the right companies that are ready to start here and flourish here. And I think there are things that we still need. We need organized capital in the state. There's no question. But there are things that this state has that other states don't. The angel investor tax credit, the digital media and software development tax credits, the Fast Start program, you know, quality jobs, all these things that were instrumental in keeping Waiter here, because it's really easy when things got a little bit difficult for us to hire as fast as we wanted to hire, especially software engineers. We kept thinking maybe we need to open an office in Austin. Maybe we need to open an engineering office in Austin. But those incentives made me think otherwise, right? Because they were really important to us when cash was tight. And so it made all the difference in the world. And I don't think every state offers those lucrative of opportunities for companies. And people will complain and say these things don't work. I am telling you right now that if they hadn't been here, Waiter would not be here. And we employ in the state of Louisiana about 3,000 people. If you take the drivers out of it, it's about 500 corporate people in the state of Louisiana that would not be here without those kinds of things, or without the support system that we have here for companies and for entrepreneurialism and so on.
Jim, there's another soundbite for our business development side. We
Yeah.
want to make sure that, because that's one of the battles that we have is helping people understand that the incentives are important to companies.
I think the battle is doing things like this so that people like me can tell them how important these things were to us and continue to be. You know, I hope we have an announcement about some other exciting things happening here in Lafayette and for Waiter in Louisiana real soon. But these are extremely important things for especially startup companies, because we raised $26 million in capital. Our largest competitors in this space got to where we are today with no less than $100 million in capital. So we have had to be very capital efficient. So all of these little things that we got along the way made a difference that are a big reason that we're here today.
We appreciate you saying that and being upfront and honest about it, because it makes a difference to us in what we try to do daily in business development and economic development. I'm going to take us off the card for a minute here, because I want to ask the question I think a lot of people in the room want to know. What's it like working with Drew Brees?
Well, I hadn't caught any passes from him, so in that instance, I'm not sure. But no, he's been a great partner for us. Drew was, again, another part of entrepreneurial success is luck, right? But the definition of luck is when opportunity meets preparedness, and Drew's an example of that. I mean, right at the time that we needed him to come on, we were introduced to him through the guys at Walk-Ons, and he's been unbelievable to work with. As a kind of a face of the brand, without us even asking, it's been tremendous. You guys probably saw the Share Thanksgiving program or the ad that he and I did together. We just had to ask. I mean, we asked him, and it was instant. Yes, absolutely, I'll do it. It's just an unbelievable person. He's got an unbelievable family. If you're going to have an athlete on your team, he's the guy you want.
Well, obviously you've got his ear, so if you could tell him to put his foot back on the gas, it seems that offense is starting to slow down a little bit.
Yeah. I hope it's not because of the result of his waiter exit that he got, but I did get accused of that, by the way, when they lost to the Cowboys. And after spending 20 years in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, that was hard to see.
Tell us about the culture of Waiter, and how do you help a new employee, the new people that you onboard, how do you help them understand the culture and get completely engaged in the culture?
Yeah, I get asked this question all the time. My belief about culture is you can't mandate what you want your culture to be, right? It just becomes culture by example. So when I started the company, the one thing I wanted to make sure is that every morning when our employees came to work, they came to work because they wanted to. And so when I started hiring employees, there's one thing I told them. I said, if you're coming to work at Waiter for the paycheck, you're going to be sorely disappointed. Because at that time, we couldn't really pay people much. So, we gave them a small salary and we gave them equity. And we also said, listen, you're going to work really long hours and really hard, but you could take off anytime you want. So we have a policy of unlimited comp time. So we don't do you get 2 weeks vacation or you accrue PTO or anything. It's like when you want to take off, you take off. And what I found, and this is, I didn't invent this, I took it from Silicon Valley companies that do these things, is it creates a culture of productivity in ways that you can't manufacture. And so our culture is kind of built from my decisions at that time to say, look, come in here, give us all you got, and if you get burnt out, take a day, take 2 days, take a week if you need to take a week. If you have a baby and you need to take a month, take a month. I hired one young lady really early on, probably in top 10 employees, and gave her the job, and then she felt it necessary to call me up the next day and say, listen, I want to accept the job and I need to talk to you before I do. I'm like, okay, come on in. So she came in and talked to me. She said, listen, I feel really bad that I didn't tell you this before, but I'm taking this job, but you need to know I'm pregnant. And I'm like, oh, well, congratulations. Well, that's great. So when are you due? And she's like, well, you're not upset? I'm like, upset? What do you mean? You're going to have a baby. This is great. And she said, well, I'm going to have to take time off of work. No problem. You take as much time as you need. Just when after you have the baby, I hope you don't decide to be a stay-at-home mom, come back to work. And she couldn't believe that I said that, right? Because she was thinking that, I was going to be upset she was having a baby and was going to have to take all this time off because at a previous employer, when she had her first child, that's what happened. And if you do those things and you just understand that these are people that work for you, then you create the culture, or they create the culture that you want based on your leadership by example. And I'm a firm believer in that. And so that's what our culture is all about. Now, as you get bigger, it gets much, much more difficult, especially when you have remote sites like we do all over the country, because there's a danger of silos setting in, right? And so we have to fight that every day. But, I think people love working for us. I hope they do. And the day that they don't, they need to come tell me.
Do you feel like that that culture helps cultivate creativity and innovation within the company?
No question. No question. Because you're especially in technology, I know I do this and many of our team members, but we go through these periods of creativity, right? Where, maybe you've been well rested, and so now all of a sudden you can think straight again or whatever it might be. And that could come at 3 o'clock in the morning. I mean, I'll wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and start taking notes on my phone just because something popped into my head. And it's very common at Waiter that happens. So I think the more, I don't want to say relaxed, because it's not a relaxed culture. I mean, we put a lot of pressure on our team to produce, right? But they know that pressure comes with the ability to unwind when it's time to unwind. I think I might be the only one that doesn't unwind enough. Or I take that back. Some people we have to force to take vacation too. But so yeah, I think it's creativity comes at odd times sometimes.
Developing leadership and leadership potential within your team. How do you promote that? How do you recognize that?
So one of the things that we've committed to since the very beginning is if you have some personal development that you want to do, you only have to ask. And, just make sure that if you're going to be gone for a week doing some conference or whatever it is, that you have someone there to cover. And I had this conversation with one of the executives from Bite Squad yesterday. It's like, wait a minute, you sent 5 people to AWS reInvent. That must have cost you a fortune. We pinched every penny and every dime. And I said, yeah, it cost us a fortune. But the gain that I got from that, because they came back fired up, ready to go with all kinds of new knowledge and produced product that they couldn't have produced had they not gone, far outweighed the cost of the seminar, right? And so that's why we've had that policy from the very beginning. And I think it's important that you reinvest in your leaders. And so we require all of our leaders to go through, we do what's called an interpersonal technology inventory. It's very similar to like a Myers-Briggs or DISC or those other programs, but this works best for us. And our whole executive team went through it. We're about to do round 2, and it's basically just going through the same thing again with a little bit of extra. Because I think every time that it helps us understand each other and it helps us understand our team members and how to interact with those folks. So I think those types of interpersonal development are extremely important to get higher productivity out of your people. And yes, they cost a lot of money. And it may not always look like on the surface it's worth the investment. At least in our case, it has certainly been worth it.
Walk us through, you talking about your leadership team and what you see in them. Walk us through how you guys tackle big decisions.
So that was a tough one for me to learn, because for so long I didn't want anyone else to make a decision that went bad, so I just wouldn't let them make a decision. And eventually you just can't do that. But what I would do in those instances is I would get feedback from everyone. And I would hear what they had to say or what their contribution was. And even if it was a departmental decision that had no, I had no business making the decision, I would tell them, I'm going to make the decision for you. And I would do that. And then what I found out is people quit giving me feedback. And so I was not able to make good decisions anymore. And then one day it kind of all came to a head in one of our executive meetings where they said, look, why do you even have us here? If you don't let us make any of the decisions, then why do you need us? And so what I did at that time is I said, okay, look, I'm going to go back to where I just listen, and I'm going to let you guys just make the decision. And you come back and tell me why you made that decision, and I'll support it. And so that's what I do now. And I almost lost my whole executive team, by the way. That's the other downside to being a startup founder is you never want to let go of all the decision making. But if you have the right leaders and you give them the right additional leadership training and support, and you surround them with a great team, and you let them make decisions, then they're going to make good decisions. But we get feedback from the whole team. I get feedback from outside counsel now, both legal counsel, legal accounting, but also consulting, those types of organizations before we make big decisions. So it's in some ways a group decision. Ultimately, the big decisions, I have the final authority on making those decisions, but it's a collaborative effort.
What's the most surprising thing you've learned about yourself as a leader?
That I could actually give up control. That was a year and a half ago, I guess, and for any of you who follow me on Facebook, you might have seen that post one day. I got home at 5 o'clock, and I was having a glass of wine, and I never post on Facebook. But that day I said, I'm going to post on Facebook because I'm pissed. I was just really pissed because, they called me to the mat that day, but rightfully so, by the way. So, yeah.
It's good. I had a boss one time that told me that if everyone in this office thought the way that I did, I wouldn't need you.
That's right.
So you want that diversity of thought.
That's correct. Yeah.
So, interesting question on the card here. What are you reading?
All right, so I'm not much of a reader. I do read, obviously, and I read quite a bit, but I have a new one that I just started reading a week ago that was a gift from someone in this room, and I cannot put this book down, I got to say. I don't know if she'll let me call her out, but it's called Blitz Scaling is the book. And it's by Reid Hoffman, and Bill Gates was contributed, to the story and so on. But it's the life that I'm living, right? So I started reading Blitz Scaling, and I decided, Dorothy, if you're in here, that I'm going to get that book for every one of my senior leaders because it's what we do every single day. And when I read, that's the kinds of books that I read, right, is I read something that will make me a better leader or make our company a stronger company. And this one is so on point with everything that we are doing today and everything that we've done to get here that it's the perfect book for me to be reading right now. So thank you, Dorothy.
This audience is filled with current leaders and a lot of future leaders, or leaders of tomorrow. What advice would you give an employee starting a leadership position for the first time?
This might be surprising, but I don't know that I'm the person to be giving leadership advice. If you ask me what startup advice would I can give a lot of that. But the reason is I still think of myself as a developing leader. I mean, I've always thought of myself as an entrepreneur, not necessarily a leader. Like when I think of a leader, I think of, people who run multi-billion-dollar companies. Maybe one day we'll be there, or political leaders or someone like that. So, and I'll use an analogy to that. Like when you go to business school and you study management, that's not going to make you a great entrepreneur because, or even if you study business and management, they teach you, when you start a business, you do a business plan, all this kind of stuff. Yeah, that's great if you have resources that are known resources, known human capital, known financial resources, a known product, or an established company with a new product, those kind of things. But when you do a startup, none of those things are known. It's experimentation. It's more like science, right? you have these theories, you test these theories, you iterate on them, and you retest them, and so on. And so I don't know what I would tell someone about being a better leader, but I could give you a lot of startup advice and about being a leader in a startup from a startup perspective.
Well, following on that then, one final question for you before we go to some audience Q&A. Any entrepreneurs in the audience, what advice would you give them on a startup or being an entrepreneur?
Well, one, you can do it in Louisiana, since that's where we're sitting right here in Lafayette. But the number one thing that I think is, I hear this often too when talking to entrepreneurs, is they have an idea and they're too afraid to tell anyone what that idea is. Or somebody's going to steal my idea. Well, I got news for you. About 1,000 other people have that exact same idea. I mean, just look at Waiter as an example. You know, now there's Grubhub, Uber Eats, DoorDash, Favor, Postmates, Bite Squad, you know, all these other companies that all started either after us or right around the same time as us and didn't know about them. But the idea is worthless. It's the execution of the idea that makes it value. So don't be afraid to share your idea and have other people tell you what they think of it, because if you don't know what other people think, you'll never know if they'll be a success or not. And when I started Waiter, it's the first thing we did. We went and talked to 1,000 consumers and 100 restaurants. And we said, this is what we're going to do. Would you do it? How much would you pay? And that's how we got to the $5 delivery fee. That's what people said that they would be willing to pay to get their favorite food delivered to their door.
Great. Chris, thank you. We're going to turn it over to some audience Q&A now. Caroline's got a microphone, and so just raise your hand and we'll get the microphone to you. Oh, Millicent's got one as well.
And for the other, I thought it was fascinating to hear you talk about how the focus on the day-to-day was what drove you through and which helped really expand the company without necessarily focusing on what were very long-term goals or big-picture goals, but really focusing on the problems of the day. And I think you kind of touched on this again when talking about what these small situations are that you really want to overcome, what the problems are. And I wanted to know if you could give us just another example of what a sort of a daily problem solving is that in retrospect made maybe all the difference in the world.
Yeah, so my role has changed quite a bit over the last year specifically. One of the things so I have an executive leadership meeting every Monday morning. And one of the things that we do is I'll ask our executives, okay, tell me one of the biggest obstacles that you faced in last week and how we overcame it. And it's kind of really built around our business, right? By talking about it as a group, then we can solve that problem together and not just leave that one leader to themselves to have to make that decision, right? And that kind of came from me making all the decisions and knowing what was helping me make decisions was getting feedback from everyone else until they quit giving me feedback because they figured I was just going to make the decision regardless of what they said or not. But just sharing that information among the group helps you get a different perspective on making those decisions, and you can make better decisions. And so we do that every week. And the decisions get bigger, obviously. At some point it was like, go back to the Boudreaux and Thibodeau. It's like Thibodeau and Boudreaux called and they didn't get their food last night, and so, the driver was missing in action. What happened? But we solve a little bit bigger problems than that today. We still have people who solve those problems because we still have those. But yeah, talk about them, get input from everybody. Then you have a bigger foundation to be able to make a good decision. Hopefully that helps.
Other questions?
I forgot to silence my phone. Number one rule of sitting in front of a group, silence your phone.
Good morning, Rob Gutierrez. You've got a lot of your guys out there on the roads, on the streets, delivering all the meals. How does infrastructure impact you, or do you really leave that to the drivers as far as traffic patterns, congestion, construction, bad roads that are out there?
Yeah.
Does your company look at all that and take that into account, or do you really just leave it up to the driver and say, you'll deal with it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, we have become experts we're traffic experts, we're weather people, we are road crews, we have had to become experts in so many things that just, when we started the company, we didn't think about. Now, we were the first drivers, so we experienced a lot of these things. I'll tell you the number one thing that impacts our ability to deliver more than anything else, maybe it's just to, Southwest Louisiana or South Louisiana in general, that this is a problem, but flooding. And if you think about it, our business accelerates when weather is bad, right? So when you get these downpours, the roads around here and all throughout Louisiana, we're not exactly the highest ground in the country. So you get a lot of flooding, and people just get irate that they can't get their food because it's flooding. I'm like, we will get this. We will get people say, well, you can't expect me to go out and get it. I mean, it's flooding. I can't get out of my house. Well, guess what, folks? If you can't get out of your house because it's flooding, we can't get to your house because it's flooding too. So yeah, we've had to uncover just so many obstacles that we didn't foresee when we started this. But we have a great team now and we've actually built these things into our technology. So our scheduling system for drivers now takes into account weather forecasts, and it spits out number of drivers we're going to need on a Friday night in Lafayette, Louisiana, based on the weather forecast and traffic patterns and other inputs that we give it. So it's always a problem.
Chris Arthur Dupre. I look at you and I see an entrepreneur and I see the CEO of Waiter, and yet, first and foremost, you're a husband and a dad. You have these two worlds that compete, right? Being the guy who's going to lead a company and scale it, and then a guy who's going to lead a family and a marriage and protect that. How do you integrate those two worlds? And I say that from a personal perspective, as a young professional building a family.
Yeah, so I can't leave out little Violet. I'm a granddad too for the last 6 months. So I guess you're talking about kind of work-life balance in a sense. I don't believe in it. I mean, there's life balance, right? And it is extremely difficult. And it's a little easier now, because Missy and I are empty nesters. And so, it's unfortunate when I travel, she can even travel with me, right? But when we started this, Logan was a freshman in high school, I think. And it was really tough because I'd have to leave work to go to football games, basketball games, track meets, whatever it was. And I had to go home and keep working until all hours of the night, right? So certainly for an entrepreneur, or even maybe for any professional in a job that is really demanding and requires a lot of your time, it's extremely difficult. But this is what I will tell you. There's no more important priority than your family. Because if they're not happy, then you cannot successfully do what you need to do to support the family the way that you want to support them and love your job and be able to give your all to your job as well. I didn't know that for many, many years, and even through the failures, that was one of the mistakes. And I'm going to give you just an example. Like, I know this is not, it's probably a different time for the most part now than it was back in the early 90s, or early 2000s, excuse me. But, I would be in meetings all day and then had people over to that I felt like I had to go and entertain them, right? They may have come into town to meet with me and those kinds of things. Now, I'll still do the occasional dinner, and we'll still do some entertainment. And some folks in here have hung out with some of our team and know we like to have fun. We're a fun team. We do it together, but we don't do it all hours of the night, and we make sure that we try to include our family anytime we can. And so I think that's important, because there are these things you have to do for work, but your family is number one, and work things can wait. Your family cannot. And I learned that the hard way, and almost lost my family through all this stuff, right? Through all these failures. But luckily, I have such a strong wife and such wonderful kids that they stuck with me even when I deserved to lose them at that point because of the things I did or wasn't doing, maybe. So family's number one.
I'm Victoria Fletcher. I had a question. So you said you like to make, decisions. So when you were just starting up and you had to get investors, did you feel like having an investor kind of took away certain decisions, or it was like they had some of a say in your company since they invested?
Great question, actually. And boy, that's a really tough one to answer. So investors make an investment in your company, but most importantly, especially when it's just a seed of an idea, they are making an investment in you. So when they try to tell you how to run your company, you have to say, listen, you invested in me, right? Then trust me to make the right decisions. Give me give me the information you have. Tell me what you think. Give me your feedback. But let me make the decision. And I tell our board now even, right? Because I still deal with this every single day, right? I've got 7 board members. They're all very smart business people in their own right. Some of them very successful entrepreneurs. And they all want to tell me how to run the company, right? And I listen to them. And I take the information that they say, but I don't always make the decision that they want me to make. And I give them the respect by telling them why I'm not going to make the decision in the direction that they were recommending, and give them my rationale for the decision I make. But I say the same thing that my leadership said to me. You hired us to make these decisions, let us make them. And I tell my board, the day you don't want me making the decision is the day you need to let me go. But if you are going to keep me, then let me make the decision. I will suffer the consequences of those decisions. And you have to do that with your investors as well. And I'll tell you this too. This is the other thing. This irritates me more than anything, is when investors invest in the company. They're investing in you, and then they think they have the right to tell you that you're going to need to bring on a CEO, right? That's bullshit. Pardon my French, but it is bullshit. They're investing in you. They need to let you be the CEO until you're not capable of being the CEO any longer. And I didn't learn this the first time. I listened to my investors say, oh, you need to bring on a CEO. You need to bring on. And so I finally gave in, and I brought on a president and COO at that point. And I let him kind of almost be the CEO, right? And he ran the company right into the ground. Why is that? Not because he was a bad executive, but he didn't have the vision for the company. I did, right? And so your investors will try to tell you to do things. And when I heard it even starting Waiter, because I had never been CEO of a successful company, right? Most of the companies that I had done had failed, and I was, just a role player in other companies that I had worked for. But I would listen, and I said, yes, you're right. When the time is right, we'll probably have to bring on another CEO. And you know what? Over time, they realized that nobody else could be the CEO for Waiter now, today, where we are, or where we were at that time, because it was my vision, right? And Apple is a good example of a company that failed at this. Apple was Steve Jobs' vision. And when they got rid of Steve Jobs and some Pepsi guy came on, John Scully, to take over the company, he couldn't run it the same way because he didn't have the vision for the company. So your investors need to understand that. It's extremely, if you're an investor in a startup company, you have to understand that if you've invested, you're invested in that vision. And you need to support that entrepreneur so that they can either achieve their vision or fail at it. And if they fail at it, yes, you're going to lose your money. Or maybe if they fail at it, then you bring someone in. But until then, it's your vision. Stick to your guns. It's a long answer, but I think it's extremely important to know that.
Hi, my name is Casey Rawlings. I'm with Hilton's Restaurant Supply. Mike, I have kind of a two-part question. I think I have the best ideas in our company, right? But I have to share these ideas with our team. And I was curious, when you have an idea or one of your members has an idea that you want to put forward, do you have a particular process or method that you employ to find out if the idea is valid, if it's a good idea, should we move forward and implement it? And the second part of the question is, do you wait for perfection on that idea before implementing it, or do you move forward with, it's good enough for now and we'll fix it?
Yeah, so I'll answer the second part of that first. The worst thing you can do with any idea, even a startup idea, is wait until everything's perfect, because guess what? It never will be, right? And so action is number one. So when you have an idea, you have to take action. Now, what we do with different ideas that we get, because we get ideas from all around the company now, and we encourage our team to put forth ideas that they think that they can improve their department or they can improve some other area of the company, and we test it. So it goes back to what I said we did with, I had the idea for Waiter. We went out, we talked to 1,000 consumers in 100 restaurants. We told them exactly what we were building. We actually showed them mock-ups or prototypes that we had built and asked them what they would pay for it. And we do that with every idea that we have now as well. So, and there's a lot of ways that we're a technology company, so we can test them online, we can see what works. The ones that work, we put a little more money behind those and try to get them to take off. The ones that don't work, we either reconfigure that idea and launch it in a different way to test it, or we just scrap it all together. But I think that's extremely important. Ideas, no one knows really how good the idea is until you test it, right? Until you talk to people about it and you say, what do you think? What will you pay? And listen, the people who tell you it's great, you're going to listen to them. And the people who tell you it's terrible, you're going to listen to them too. Get all the information. That goes back to collecting all the data you can collect, and then make the best guess that you can make on what's what's right for the company. But at least then it's an educated guess, right? It's you've done the work to prove out or test scientific theory, right? You've proven out some things that now it's not just to throw it up against the wall and see if it sticks, kind of a deal. But I would rather that than not taking action at all, because I think most importantly it's take action.
So shorten that gap from the idea to at least do something.
It's got to be quick iterations, right? And if you get a little bit of good positive feedback and you have to iterate to get better feedback, you iterate quickly and you go out again. And we do that sometimes we even do that with product. I don't recommend, especially with software product, that you do that very often, because it could have catastrophic consequences, especially when you get to our size. But it's still better than no action, because no action gets you nowhere, right? I'm working with another startup company right now that wants everything to be perfect. And I'm like, it just won't be. It won't ever be perfect. I mean, the first Waiter logo was a headless, handless server that was in the shape of a W. We thought that was clever, but we got it out there.
You kind of said the word. Oh, please go ahead.
The Hilliard University Art Museum. Can you talk a little bit about your corporate philanthropy and community engagement?
Yeah, so I think it was last year, just before Thanksgiving, not this Thanksgiving, but the one a year ago, we started thinking about what we needed to do. You know, we were having some success at that point, and we were like, you know, everybody's excited, but you know, what are we doing in the community to get the community excited about, you know, us helping others? And so we put our heads together and we came up with a program called Share Thanksgiving. And I loved the idea. It wasn't my idea. I loved the idea from the get-go because it was about taking families in need during one of the most difficult times of the year, Thanksgiving, when everybody's gathering family and putting food on the table and celebrating all the things that they're thankful for. Some people can't even put food on the table. And we're in the food business. We put food on your tables every night, I hope. And so we decided we needed to do something. And we needed to not just do it, you know, just the company, but we needed to involve all of the stakeholders in Waiter. That's our restaurants, our customers, our employees, our investors, everyone. And so we came up with Share Thanksgiving. And so last Thanksgiving was the first Thanksgiving we did it. We fed 1,000 families. Our goal this year was to feed 2,000 families. And I'm happy to say that Share Thanksgiving this year fed 2,000 families in 40 markets or 230 cities. And next year will even be bigger, I mean, much bigger than this year. And so I hope we can branch off and it not just be for Thanksgiving, but it be, you know, share, you know, Waiter shares. That's really kind of what the dream is for us. And it starts with Share Thanksgiving. But Waiter Shares is our philanthropic efforts to give back to the communities, the local communities that has given so much to us. And we wanted to do it where our employees got involved. So all of our employees get out and do deliveries the week of Thanksgiving. Not just the drivers. I went out, did some Share Thanksgiving deliveries. Our CFO, our Chief Marketing Officer, our COO, everyone. And I'll tell you, it's one of the most fulfilling things that we do at Waiter is to get out there and see Waiter's always been good at people's reaction when you get to the door. I mean, you're bringing them food, right? But when they don't know how they're going to put the next meal on the table, it is extremely amazing to see the reaction of those folks. And that's our major effort throughout the year. And we do other things as well. But thank you guys for supporting that this past year, the Share Thanksgiving campaign. If you contributed, truly appreciate it. And if you see the videos that we put on Facebook, you'll see the families that we serve also appreciate it.
Of your talk today and kind of the word that you've become kind of synonymous with in South Louisiana is entrepreneur. And now that you're the CEO of a publicly traded company, I'm just curious, are your entrepreneurial days over? And if not, how are you going to kind of scratch that itch?
Great question as well. So my role changes significantly, right? If anyone of you in here are a CEO of a public company, you understand that. But companies in general, where they start to fail is when they quit being innovative or they quit being entrepreneurial. I think those two words kind of interchange, right? And so I tell our team all the time, we actually have a C-level executive called our Chief Innovation Officer. And his role is to make sure that he understands every aspect of the business and where we can innovate in that business, and that he is driving our employees to create ideas that allow us to keep innovating. Because I think the day you quit innovating is the day your company dies. So someone in that organization has to be responsible. And if you don't have that today, I highly recommend having someone responsible for innovation. It doesn't matter what your business is. It doesn't have to be technology. It can be, it can be a CPA firm. It can be a law firm. But somebody's got to innovate. How do CPA firms innovate? Well, come up with new ideas on how to handle, new services for the on-demand economy and the implications that has on companies. We're a perfect example of that. Our insurance, I'll tell you, the insurance business is a business that needs some disruption and some innovation. You know, here we are, we have now with us and Bikes about 15,000 drivers on the road. Somebody's got to come up with a better way of covering these drivers and how we insure these things, right? The innovation needs to happen in every company. And so you have to keep innovating.
Hi, Chris. My name is Jess Henry. I'm with the Lafayette Convention and Visitors Commission. Just want to say congratulations on such a wonderful year first. That's incredible. I've had the opportunity to visit several of your operations centers, the one here in Lafayette as well as Lake Charles. And the folks that I've met with really speak to the culture that you've discussed today. Are there any other employee retention programs or ideas that you can share with us?
Boy, that's something we are looking for ourselves, right? I mean, we still strive to innovate in employee retention, especially as it relates to driver retention. And we just started doing some things that have really helped in that regard. No one specific thing, right? What I will tell you is if you talk to your employees, they will tell you how to innovate for employee retention. And it's a simple question, right? It's like, tell me what you need to do. Tell me what we need to do so that when you get out of bed every morning, you just can't wait to get to work, right? And the bigger organization you are, the more difficult that becomes. For like the first 200 employees, I knew everyone's name, right? I tried to make it a point to know everybody's name. Now, when I walk through the office, people say, you don't even know my name. I'm like, I know, I'm so sorry, you know, I need to come spend more time in here, and I need to do that, right? I do need to do that, because if I go do that, I will probably hear some of the things that aren't so great about our company. And I'm someone who's empowered to make those changes. And so if I know what employees feel or what they think when they get out of bed in the morning, then I can make it better for them to come to work the next day. I hope I can. At least I can try. But if I don't know, then I can't even try. Right? So talk to your employees. They will tell you what you need to do.
Chris, thank you. Thank you very much. We appreciate you. We appreciate Waiter for everything you've done for our community.
And I'd like to thank you guys. Someone mentioned this to me the other day, and I just wanted to make sure everyone here knew this. You know, that NASDAQ bell ringing ceremony was not just for Waiter. That NASDAQ bell ringing ceremony was for the city of Lafayette, for the region of Acadiana, for the state of Louisiana. We can do it in Louisiana, and we need more public companies here, and we can work together to ensure that we have them. So thank you guys for having me today.
Thank you all for being with us today. I want to thank Acadiana Center for the Arts for hosting us. Thank you very much. AOC for videoing. Again, Possible Kuwait, Netterville, and Iberia Bank for sponsoring. I hope everyone has a very happy holidays.